have 4 simple rules. Number 1, we don't discuss politics, ever. Number 2, this is not a religious channel, and while you might hear people say, God bless you, or I'm going to pray for you, or I wouldn't have gotten through this without my faith, that's fine. What's not fine is to say, my God is better than your God, or here's why you're not getting into heaven. It's not going to fly. Number 3, we believe wholeheartedly if you can't control your tongue, then you can't control your life. So while on board, there's not going to be any cursing in the live chat, period. And number 4, there is no room for mean people on the lifeboat. Because we discuss very sensitive things from people's past in our group setting, we got to protect those people. The only way they feel confident and comfortable discussing those things is in an environment that is free of trolls and mean people. So if you're a mean person or you're a troll, we're going to block you for life. And if your account happens to be less than 24 hours old, we're probably a little suspicious right from the word go. Why? Well, because there are people in this world who enjoy being cruel solely for the sake of being cruel. It's not going to fly here. But if you're here because you're trying to get sober and live your best life, then you might find that the lifeboat is just that, a lifeboat. I'm Captain Tommy Scoville, and we will see you on deck. Good evening, everybody. I'm Captain Tommy Scoville. I'm on the other side of the glass, as always, is my partner, Mark Wages, and you are on the lifeboat. And I have a pair of headphones that Squirrel has not chewed through, which is making me pretty happy. I can actually hear you guys in both ears, which is kind of a big deal. It's been one of those days, people. Every once in a while, you have those things where nothing goes right. Well, today was kind of one of those days. I was telling my partner before we got rolling, the culmination of which was the loss of a credit card. And there's nothing more fun than losing a credit card and wondering if somebody's out there just having a field day with it. And there's, with what I do with watches and everything, it's kind of a bummer when you don't have, available credit. So while that is being ironed out, it, just sort of make things tough. But if ever there's been a time that is just epic for beating on a group of people that really deserve to get beat on, tonight is the night. Before I get rolling, though, I want to welcome all the newcomers to the boat. Appreciate y'all being here. Really do. Johnny, thank you. And good to see you. Also, I want to do a shout out. Weird thing happened with my phone. And for the better part of 10 days, I did not get an incoming text message. Brandon Taylor, good to see you, my friend. And he's right. Hit that like button, people. Let's get more people on the boat. We really need you to do that. Hey, Lady Fiona, good to see you. So what happened is sorry, I heard Lady Fiona and completely lost my train of thought. So the 10 days that the phone did not deliver a text message. So I got a text message today, and the text message says, it was 1 year ago today that I put down alcohol, and it is the best move I ever made in my life. And I thought, man, how cool is that? And I thought, it seems odd, though, because this man actually bought a really beautiful wristwatch as as sort of a talisman, right? Celebrating that 1 year of sobriety. So I thought, that's really odd. And I shot back a text message and said, man, congratulations. I'm so proud of you. Do you care if I shot that out on the lifeboat? And he was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, you're 365 days sober? And he said, no, I'd love you to shout that out. That's fine. But that was 10 days ago. Bizarre, right? It somehow got lost in the ether. And I'm telling you, I'm not crazy. It literally went ding. And I looked, and the timestamp, everything was just happened. But he sent it 10 days ago. So very, very odd. Very, very odd. But to Cemetery 76, a big shout out for an entire year of sobriety. People, that has got to make you just happy as all get out. I'm all for tossing some ones up there and for our brother, because that is really as good as it gets. A full year of not touching the poison is really an accomplishment. So congratulations, my brother. We are proud of you. We really are. Fiona, always good to see you. Survival Game, SG is here. Alrighty, people. The opioid epidemic can be blamed on so many things. It really can. You can sort of trace this to all kinds of things that created a perfect storm. But those are things. There is a group of people that have blood literally all over their hands. And it's amazing because the number of people who are going to go to prison today for drug dealing, who made $1,000, or $2,000. We're talking about a family that made $34 billion peddling drugs that has caused the death of, right now, depending on who you believe, pretty close to 1 million people have died from the opioid epidemic. And the opioid epidemic has a face, right? It is there is a group of people, one family in particular, called the Sackler family. It's probably not a name that most people have heard of, and it's because they didn't call the drug Sackler Cotton, right? They did everything they could to put their name as far away from this as possible, and I'll get into some of the things they did to really distance themselves from all of this. But the Sackler family were the people who brought you the opioid epidemic. I mean, no two ways about it. And the amazing thing is, this isn't their first go around. The Sackler family started out with three brothers, Arthur, Mortimer, and Raymond. These guys were all psychiatrists. And between the three of them, they had written over 100 papers on the biochemistry of drugs when it comes to mental issues. They pooled their finances together and they bought a little pharmaceutical company that wasn't doing a whole lot at the time. And this is not back in 1952. And the name of the company was Purdue Pharmaceuticals. Really not much of a company at that point. But Arthur Sackler became more of a marketer than anything else. And he was the first person to go to JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association, and talk them into a full color brochure for a drug, which had never been done before, right? And based on the 100 papers that he and his brother had written, they thought, well, we'll give the guy a chance. And he was releasing a new drug, right? And it was the first drug ever to break the $100 million mark. And the name of the drug was Valium. He had a really cool concept. If you look at it purely from a marketing standpoint, this was a great concept. He came up with a way of marketing this stuff by using a different form of marketing. Basically, this normally was something that would be prescribed for one thing and one thing only, right? This was an anxiety disorder medication. But what he did is he came up with a couple of cool names, like stress disorder, right? Which was different at the time than anything anyone had ever heard. And the nice thing about stress disorder was names like that, or his favorite, which was psychic tension. There was no way to diagnose psychic tension. So it was the first time ever that somebody walked in and said, I'm looking for Valium. Up to that point, no one had ever gone to a doctor and requested a medication. You would go in, tell the doctor what was wrong, the doctor would write you a prescription. But with psychic tension, right, and stress disorder out there, people were going in and saying, you know what, I'm not getting along with my husband. I would like Valium. And he was the genius who said, we should make the 5 milligram ones for ladies and make them yellow, because I think that it's a more marketable color to women. I mean, this is really the depth that this man went to. And over $100 million was made on this drug in the 50s and early 60s. And it put Arthur on the map. He was inducted in the early 60s into the, believe it or not, there is a Hall of Fame for this, the Medical Advertising Hall of Fame. The Medical Advertising Hall of Fame. What he did was enslave a huge portion of the population. He got them addicted to Valium. And I think there was enough, sort of a ripple of bad publicity through all of this that Arthur backed off. And they, basically enjoyed their billions of dollars that they had made. And that basically stayed the way it was until the 1980s. And there was a brand new type of medicine out there that we take for granted because you've heard it your whole life, but hospice, right? Treating people who were dying and making their last days on earth something that was a little bit more tolerable was a brand new concept, especially for people with cancer. And they needed a drug that would help these people sleep, a pain medication that would last longer than, say, 4 or 5 hours. Because obviously 4 or 5 hours of sleep, if you wake up, hurting and you take meds, you could be looking at an hour before you get relief. And these people who were dying couldn't get even a halfway decent night's sleep. So they came up with a drug called MS Contin. The term Contin makes reference to anything that the Sackler family and Purdue had come up with that was a time-release formula. MS was for morphine sulfate. And this became the gold standard for treating people who were dying. And you know what? It was a hell of a drug. It really was. It was a perfect drug for a perfect usage. You didn't have to worry if these people got addicted. They weren't going to live long enough for that to be an issue. But it made the end of their life tolerable. And it got a lot of really good publicity for Purdue Pharmaceutical. However, unhappy with the amount of money that they were making, which was in the hundreds of millions, but not the billions, they turned the reins over to Arthur's nephew. His name was Richard. And if you want to call him Dick, I'm cool with that. Richard decided that he was going to do everything within his power to start selling morphine sulfate content in a time-released formula to people who did not have cancer. And he was able to break that out of the hospice treatment and into the mainstream. And he did this through the use of a lot of people at the Food and Drug Administration. And this is something you're going to see that is a recurring theme with the people at Purdue Pharmaceutical. They managed to get really good relationships with the people at the Food and Drug Administration. On one occasion, a guy that left the Food and Drug Administration after approving OxyContin, 2 years later took a huge job with Purdue Pharmaceutical. If that doesn't stink like something is wrong, then you're not really giving it a whole lot of thought. Right? For a government agent to walk away from a government job and instantly start working for the people he was approving stinks. I mean, there's absolutely no two ways about it. It stinks. But there was a lot of people who viewed MS Contin as a way to treat people who were dying. And for that reason, when doctors said, well, we're going to try to put you on MS Contin, they'd go, that's that end of life stuff that you guys have been doing all of the hospice. Yeah, I don't want to take that. Why don't we stick with something a little different that I'm not dying. I'm not doing this. So Richard wanted to take the Contin formula and move it into something else. And he got people at the FDA to basically sign off on the fact that oxycodone, right, the main ingredient in Percocet, was a far less dangerous drug than morphine sulfate. In spite of the fact that it is 50 times stronger, they got people at the FDA to approve for use in people up to, as low as the age of 11, right? When OxyContin came out in the early 90s, it was approved for people as young as 11 years old. Again, courtesy of the Food and Drug Administration. They started pumping this stuff out. And at the time, there was an article done that we've talked about on the Lifeboat 100 times, right? This is the Porter Glick article. It was written for the New England Journal of Medicine, where they stated that opiates, right, had a 1% abuse rate among the people who took them. This was absolute horse crap, but it didn't stop 600 publications from quoting that study. The whole time this study was being quoted, the guy that wrote it was busy doing what he was doing for a living and had no clue that a letter he had written was being quoted as if it was a study. It wasn't. It was a letter he wrote that said, yeah, I tracked 400 people, and of the people I wrote these prescriptions to, only about 1% got addicted. That's not a study. There's no double blind. There's no nothing. But the Porter Glick study, which wasn't a study, got quoted again in 600 journals. It got quoted in the literature for Purdue Pharmaceutical as they started to pump out OxyContin. And you know that when somebody designs a drug, they have a period of time that they own that patented drug before anyone else can make a generic formula, right? Which is just making the exact same drug and selling it under any name. That is so that you can recoup all of the money that it took to make the drug. Well, the really funny thing is they got a very long window to recoup all of the money that it took to make OxyContin, which is really funny because all they did was take oxycodone and use the content release formula, which had already been developed. They didn't need to recoup any money on that a second time. But somebody at the FDA went, yeah, take 10, 12 years and recoup all of the money that you want on that. So Richard, being the Richard that he is, started to micromanage everything about how this was marketed. He used to put out these massive reports and send them to all of the pharmaceutical reps. And inside it, like you're reading right along, and it would say, call my secretary and tell her the word demon, or call my secretary and tell her the word Ferrari. And these people would call up and go, I don't know why, but in the literature, it said, call you and say Ferrari. He micromanaged so much. He wanted to know who was reading his articles and who wasn't. The people that were reading the articles got the really cush jobs, like West Virginia, right? Like Ohio. When people say, what is it about these parts of the country? Why is the drug addiction so bad there? Well, because Dick Sackler realized that this was blue collar America. These people had tons of online injuries. So pill mills got set up in all of these small rural towns so that the doctors could start writing prescriptions to anybody that had been injured at work. And believe it or not, folks, they got to a point where in many cases, the number of prescriptions that had been written in these places were up to 2 times the size of the population of the town, right? Imagine a town of 60,000 people and 120,000 prescriptions for OxyContin written. It really makes you start to wonder. And over a 5-year period of time, they went from 300,000 scripts a year to 6 million scripts a year. They stepped up their marketing like you wouldn't believe. That you can't pay a doctor to write a prescription for OxyContin. It's against the law. You can pay them to make speeches about why OxyContin is a good drug. And they started to pay these people ridiculous money to go around and make speeches for Purdue. Most of the time, there was no speech. It was a vacation and a very large check, where they started to do these outings where they were going to train people on the correct use of OxyContin and how to write a prescription for it, for the appropriate stuff. And they would fly entire families into the Bahamas, and it was literally an assembly line. The people that were doing these, putting on these seminars, so to speak, they didn't even go home. They would stay there, do one. The next week, there'd be a whole new crew there. The next week, there'd be a whole new crew there. And they just stayed there, cranking out armies of doctors who went out and started writing scripts for this. And along the way, they took pharmaceutical reps, the people that went out and visited doctors' offices and handed them bags full of free OxyContin and said, give these to your patients with a coupon so that they don't pay for the first month. Now, not only is that great marketing, it's evil as hell. Because at the time that they were saying it had a 1% chance of addiction, Purdue Pharmaceutical knew that the real number was 13%, right? Internal memos have proven that Richard Sackler knew that it was 13 times higher than what they were putting in their literature. There is evidence, people, no joke evidence, that when the first round of overdose and accidental death numbers came in for OxyContin, and they came in and said, there's 60 some odd thousand deaths that have been attributed to this. Richard Sackler said, really? I honestly thought it would be worse than that. Wrap your brain around the evil that it takes to knowingly pump out a product that you think will kill more than 65,000 people and just chalk that up to the cost of doing business, knowing ahead of time. Now, look, if you take any abusable substance, throw alcohol in there, any abusable substance that you can get addicted to, the standard, the accepted standard for what the addictive property rate is. In other words, you give alcohol to X number of people. For most drugs, 3% of the people who use it are going to hit full-blown addiction. And that's with any substance. So when you've got one that's at 13%, you know that what you have is heinously addicting. Yet you continue to put out literature that says less than 1% of the people that take this are even going to find themselves getting addicted. There's an amazing video that was done called I Got My Life Back. And there's a doctor in there talking about how it's a myth that opiates are addicting. A myth. And he talked about one patient after another and how these people were able to get their life back through the wonder of OxyContin. I'll give you 2 guesses who put out that video, right? And I watched it yesterday. It'll make you ill. Purdue Pharmaceutical filmed that, right? And paid doctors to come in and basically knowingly lie through their teeth. Now, whether the doctors were in on it, at that level in the beginning, because there are doctors who absolutely have come out and said, I believe the literature. As soon as my patient started saying to me, boy, this stuff, I can't seem to stop, there were doctors who instantly pumped the brakes. And Purdue Pharmaceutical very carefully looked at every single doctor and how many prescriptions they were writing. Now, you would think every pharmaceutical company should do that, because if you find somebody who's writing, say, 70 prescriptions a day, it's not possible to sit down and talk to 70 people a day and diagnose what's wrong with them and write them a prescription. So obviously this is a pill mill. But see, Purdue wasn't doing it for that reason. They were doing it so that they knew which doctors they could cut larger deals with. They knew which doctors to send more free samples to and which doctors to give coupons to that they could give away so that your first 90 days of OC are free. If that's not drug dealing, what the hell is? Honestly. I mean, it's like any dealer on the street. Nah, take 5 of them. This is on me, man. Go home. No, not a problem. It's on the house. They did this drug dealing at a worldwide level, right? And the money started to roll in trucks. I'm not exaggerating, people. The amount of money that they began to make, by halfway through OxyContin's run, they had made $18 billion. Selling something, and you talk about a guaranteed product, everybody you're selling to gets addicted, right? The latest reports from the Center for Disease Control says that 4 out of 5 intravenous drug users in this country started off on pills. That was not the case before the Sackler family. You realize that? Literally, they invented this phenomenon. And while they did, they got rich. And they gave tons of money away to the arts, basically. The Guggenheim Museum in New York got a pile of money. There is a very famous church in Westminster Cathedral, and they have the Sackler window. It's a huge stained glass window in the front that they donated to. There are museums all over the world that have the Sackler wing, right? They just gave away all of this money so that they could look cool and look philanthropic. While they literally killed hundreds of thousands of people knowingly. Now, it got worse, right? All of a sudden, the bad press started to roll in, and there were a lot of people in government talking about something needs to get done, right? The number of deaths, when it hit the 100 deaths a day mark, it was declared by our previous president an epidemic, right? A national drug crisis in this country at 100 a day. Well, how did it take that long? How did we not do it before 100 people a day? Well, the answer to that is $900 million. That's what was donated to politicians, right? $900 million. Again, it's a drug dealer, except instead of paying off the cops, the local cops that could come and bust you, they were paying off the big dogs. They were paying off the people that could write laws to stop what they were doing. And this just continued and continued. And as the numbers piled up, you think that the Sacklers might have pumped the brakes. Right? Maybe they would have started to realize just how destructive this property was. However, that's not the direction that they went in. In fact, they went the complete opposite direction. When the press got horrendous and people started screaming for somebody's head on a platter, they went to Congress themselves and they said, the drug OxyContin is dangerous in the form it's in. We realize we've made some mistakes and we're going to make some changes to it. And what they did was they made it so that you couldn't snort it, right? And they made it so you couldn't shoot it. When you mix water into the new recipe, it goes poof, and the pill literally turns into what looks like a hamburger, right? It just swells up. You can never get it into a needle. You can't snort it. You could no longer smoke it, right? It looked like they were really trying to help. However, people continued to die. Now, doesn't really make sense, right? If you couldn't concentrate the stuff into its more potent form by crushing up the cotton, then how is that possible? Well, what they did was they released a 30 milligram version of it that didn't have any of those protections in it. Why not? Why would you not put those protections into the 30 milligram pill, right? Which you call Percocet, but you do it to the OxyContin, but not the time released Percocet, which is an OxyContin. They left that in there for the dope users. They left that in there for the people that were getting high, but they showed up and they cleaned up their name a little bit by changing the formula of OxyContin. Sounded good, didn't it? Well, as the press got worse and that didn't get it done, they went for the absolute ultimate in dirtbag. They showed up in Congress and said, with a few years left on the patent of OxyContin, they showed up and said, you were right the first time. This drug should not be manufactured, period. This is a dangerous drug. We're going to recommend that nobody should ever be allowed to make this. Now, what all that did was it bought Purdue 5 more years of being able to crank out OxyContin with no competition. Congress, I'm sure after being greased by every single politician out there, voted that no one should be able to make a generic version of this drug, right? Anybody making a generic would have to cease and desist, and Purdue Pharmaceutical would have the rights to this stuff. Knowing they're killing people, they wanted to ride out just a little bit more cash, which got to 34 and some change, almost $35 billion. And the lawsuits started coming in. And the lawsuits started piling up. They started coming in from states. They started coming in from people. And I'll tell you something. If I sound a little pissed, I got OxyContin. I was one of the people who, when this stuff was really cooking, I was going to a pain management doctor in Salt Lake City, Utah. And they wrote, find your own dose. Literally, that's what the prescription said. They gave me 5s, 20s, 30s, right? And said, find your own dose. And I remember coming back and saying to the doctor, a woman that was about 4 feet tall, really short woman. I went back in and said, the amount I'm taking is just ridiculous. You're not going to write a prescription for this. But you told me, she said, what are you taking? I said, 15 a day, 15 80s. She went, wrote a prescription for 15 80s a day. When I took it to the pharmacy the first time and I handed it to the pharmacist, he said to me, I can't fill this. I've told the story on the light bill before. I said, why can't you fill it? He said, I cannot fill a prescription for more than 30 days at a time because it's a Schedule II narcotic. And I said, this is a 30-day prescription. And he went, oh, okay. Yeah, I'll fill it for you. And I sat down and, started doing stuff on the phone. And like a minute later, the police cars came rolling in and the cops came running into the lobby, with basically freaking out. Which one is it? Him. And they came over and the guy was like, well, I want to know where you got that. The doctor showed up in the lobby and just started screaming at people. It is, and I don't blame this doctor. I really don't. I blame the Sacklers. They got people to believe that human beings had a right to never hurt, that we had a God-given right to never feel pain of any kind. Why the hell would you allow an 11-year-old to get this drug? Truthfully, if you start, and I don't mean that an 11-year-old should not have, pain medication, no matter how, if they're hurting, you should treat them. But an OxyContin 80, I mean, how much do you weigh at 11 years old? You think there's a kid out there that truthfully needed Oxy 80s? But this mindset that no one should ever have to feel pain of any kind permeated every single part of the medical, community. And the number of doctors who are sitting in prison because they wrote prescriptions for OxyContin, like I said earlier, literally there were towns, especially West Virginia was horrendous. Parts of Florida were even worse, where the population of the town was 20,000 and they had written 250,000 prescriptions for OxyContin. So you sit there and go, how is that friggin' possible? Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, didn't they change the actual questions the doctors had to ask by law?
Oh, yeah. They absolutely did. There's nobody listening to the sound of my voice right now who has not seen the chart that said with the faces that they go from, right? I just did an 80 to, oh, I'm miserable. Okay. That was the Sackler family that came up with that. because now, people used to come in and they were very hesitant to say to a doctor, they always felt like they were trying to, they didn't want to sound like they were working anyone. Now you just had this cool little thing you had to point out. Where are you on this list? I'm that guy right there. Okay, OxyContin. How much do you need? Literally. I mean, they attack this at virtually every level, and it is the gold standard now, is it not? You go to a hospital, you go to an emergency room, you go anywhere, and they say, "What is your pain level on a scale from 1 to 10?" And they hand you this little sheet with all the funny little faces on it, right? Mark nailed it. This didn't occur prior to the Sacklers and Purdue Pharmaceutical.
My GP actually told me that when he was in school, because he was getting out of school right when all this was happening.
Right.
And he told me that before, because he had a class one year, and then the next year they changed it because of this. And they had to treat your pain down to 0.
Correct.
There was no, hey, yeah, I can feel a little bit of pain, or heck, we all feel a bit of pain. You walk down the street, you go back home, you sit down, your feet start to swell a little bit, like me and Tommy were just talking, and boop, boop,
yep.
boop, 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 boop. That's a little bit of pain. They're telling you, no, you don't have to feel that no more. And this is
correct. It's a God-given right that you do not have to endure pain at any level. They were doing everything within their power to bring people's pain to a 0. And it got to a point where the literature was so deceptive, people, that you honestly can't blame every doctor out there. There were dentists who were taking out people's teeth. And since the dawn of man, you would get, 15 Percocets, right, to deal with the pain of having your molars taken out. And you would take those home, and that's the prescription you got. Well, they're telling these people it's the same drug, but the content formula makes it less addicting. Where did they get that? Well, the people at the FDA swore to it right before taking a job at Purdue Pharmaceutical. But they really truthfully believe, doctors across the board believed that in a time-released version, this was a drug that wasn't going to get people addicted. There were doctors out there that thought, thank God, right? This is what we have been waiting for since medicine started. A non-addicting pain medication. If the literature was right, and 1 out of every 100 people were going to get addicted, then this really was the magic bullet. Of course, we all know that to be crap, didn't we? Sorry, I saw a comment here that John says Suboxone is dangerously prescribed as well. You know what? They're certainly making it a lot easier to get it into the hands of people who are addicted. That said, it's kind of a knee-jerk reaction, isn't it? I mean, this is a substance that basically can take away the roulette wheel effect of the people who are out there trying to not get sick. And you got to do something, don't you? I mean, you allowed your government, right? If you're the good old US of A, your government, your Food and Drug Administration, let this happen. Your politicians let this happen while bringing in 100 million shy of $1 billion in political contributions. That's a lot of pressure. If you're a politician and somebody just donated $60 million to a PAC to help you get reelected, you might just vote in that direction, right? And that's really what happened. Don Morning says, they offered me Suboxone. I said, no, thank you. You know what? God bless you. If you can get through without it, that's the best case scenario. It really is. If you can get sober and not have to take that, my hat is off to you. It really is. Now, depending on the amount of time that you've been on it, the prevailing science these days will talk about opiate use disorder, which is not the same thing as being addicted, by the way. An opiate use disorder is when the receptors of your brain have spent so much time coded, right? I'm a pretty decent example. Take 7 grams a day of heroin use for a couple of decades. Well, 3 decades altogether, but the last 20 years, 6 to 7 grams a day. When you finally get off of that stuff, the receptors basically send out impulses to the body because they expect to be coded. I went 5 years, people. I went 5 years of sobriety with nothing, right? And I couldn't be a happy person. I couldn't be a functional person all day long. And trust me when I tell you that the effort that I put into this was overwhelming. But for me, it wasn't an option. When you start doing, 1580s a day, right? Which was the start. It wasn't the finish. It was the start of the downhill run. But by the time it was all said and done, those receptors need to be painted, or I'm just not going to be normal. And I went 5 years of trying as hard as possible. And Suboxone for me has been a magic bullet. It absolutely has been. And there are people for whom it is. Now, are there people who are on it that probably shouldn't be? You betcha. But are there people on every substance on the planet that shouldn't be? And if it comes down to someone who's says, I'm never going to go through sickness, I can't do it. And the option becomes you're putting someone on buprenorphine or they're buying fentanyl in the street. I think buprenorphine's the better bet. But that's just my personal opinion. And I'm not angry at anybody that.
I think the difference is what she's talking about, Tommy. Is the fact that she isn't on pain meds. She's having back surgery.
Good God! It's not a painkiller.
No,
no. It's an awful painkiller.
This was wrong, but reading by what they said, they offered her Suboxone. She said no thanks. I went back and looked up, and she said that went to pain doctor today. I turned down opiates and all pills. So I mean, whether she was on there before, I don't know. That doesn't say.
Well, the guy who invented its name was John Lewis. And the idea in the idea in the beginning was there are women who can't take morphine, and for someone who can't take the morphine molecule of any way, childbirth can be really rugged, right? For women who have had an epidural is fentanyl, right? That's what's in an epidural, and it is a very, very strong painkiller that makes childbirth a much easier process. Certainly doesn't make it a walk in the park, but it does a lot to take the edge off. So John Lewis was looking for something for women that couldn't take anything. And buprenorphine was a pretty cool concept. Unfortunately, it's not a great painkiller, not when you compare it to things, like natural opiates. It certainly doesn't give you the kind of relief that a real opiate would. However, years later, when they started to re-examine a lot of different reconstruction allergic to morphine, there you go. That's why they offered her Suboxone. If you're allergic to morphine,
that's definitely a thing there. And here, Rip made a comment there too about it not being, you can't really abuse Suboxone, and there's a reason he said that. The reason is there's it's not just buprenorphine in there. And that's a very, very common misconception. It's not just the opiates in there. There's naloxone in there, which is Narcan.
Correct.
You guys have to understand that.
0.5 milligram to every 2 milligrams.
Yes.
So for every 2 milligrams of the drug, there is 0.5 milligram of naloxone, of Narcan. The other thing that's really odd is even before they do that, the bioavailability of that drug, like how much gets into your system. If you're given 8 milligrams of buprenorphine, even without the naloxone, you're not getting 8 milligrams in your body. So it really is a very unusual drug. And the way they've got it put together now, the number of lives it's saving is fantastic. I still will say, if you can live without it, that's the best case scenario, right? It really is. The best case scenario is if you can live without anything.
Yep. It is.
And I wish I could, people. I'll tell you what, I've gotten down to a very small amount of it. And I wrestled for a long time with the concept of, what if I had to take this for the rest of my life? And I arrived instead at, I got to take this for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Right. I do not have a problem with that. Now, there are a lot of things that Suboxone will help with long-term pain, but without the high or the heavy opiates. So you get to know and live with a normal pain. You're right. Absolutely. It is not. Yeah. He nailed it. I mean, that's well really, said. And it is what, it's well said.
Again, well said, Rip.
Yeah.
And again, I don't think me and Tommy are not advocating for Suboxone.
We're not advocating for any
exactly.
Drug,
that's what I'm going to say. We're advocating for people to get the treatment that they need for their personal experience of what they're going through, and that's what we're advocating for. And that treatment could be no medication at all, That treatment could be a dose of 24 milligrams at the beginning and tapering off. That
Right?
treatment could mean methadone for some people. That treatment could mean whatever it is. It's just
Yes.
we want people to get help and get back to a point where they're not white knuckling it through life, and that's what we're trying to
The
do.
and here's the thing: after having spent a lot of time working with people to try to help them get sober, um, if you're spending the majority of your day thinking about sticking a needle in your arm, then I can't really talk to you a whole lot about anything. What any of the cessation drugs now, whether it be um, buprenorphine or methadone, or whether it's something to treat alcohol, the purpose of any of the cessation stuff is to get the addict to a point where they can listen to you. Because when you got a 7 gram a day heroin habit and they get you off heroin and stick you in a room and want to have a conversation with you, the person trying to have a conversation becomes Charlie Brown's teacher. And you literally hear wah, 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 and your brain is going heroin, 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 to the point where, you literally can't link two thoughts together. But yes, make no mistake. Tracy says they are useful but addicting. Make no mistake they are.
Yeah.
Make no mistake they are.
They're an opiate. I mean, there's opiates there. It's going to be an addiction.
Yeah.
It's just
absolutely.
And this is a conversation that is definitely helpful for most people. Because
Don, great comment from Don too. Mm-hmm. Going back to pain doctor 2 weeks post back surgery, he commended me for making my own decisions. And do you know what, people? The key is to make your own decisions. It really is. Be an advocate for yourself and weigh all of the pros and all of the cons. Very often what you hear is you're trading one drug for another. And we all, my belief on this has always been, yeah, you're absolutely trading one drug for another, but I'm trading a drug that I can't overdose on for a drug that currently is killing 300 people a day. Right. So it's one of those situations that it is a miracle for a lot of people. And, for that, I don't badmouth it. I don't advocate it either. I don't advocate drug use on this channel as a rule of thumb.
I do want to say one thing here though.
Sure.
The comment was made that you'll feel normal once you get off Suboxone. I can tell you right now, I feel normal, and I'm on Suboxone. And the reason why I can say that is for the fact that I don't sit around thinking about Suboxone. I don't sit around thinking about taking my dose here, there, and everywhere. It doesn't dictate my life. I feel very normal, and when I take it, I feel no different than when I did before I took it. I don't get high, I don't get low, and I don't get anything but in the middle. And I'm level. That's where I'm at. And it's allowed me to go from thinking about an opiate that drugged me through the hell of life back to thinking to where I was at before I got on anything at all. The drug was and for me, this is me talking about my experience. That drug was a miracle. Ask my wife. If you want to know how that affected me and how I am now compared to where I was before, ask the people around you. That's where you're going to get the real answers. And I can tell you right now, I'm normal.
Well, and my question to anyone who says that or thinks that is just exactly how long would I have to be sober? Because you got to understand, I didn't quit heroin with the use of Suboxone. I quit heroin cold turkey. And for 5 years, right, I managed to stay sober like this for 5 years. And, I did yoga and I did meditation and I did virtually everything. And I finally met a doctor that just said, let me explain to you the difference between addiction and an opiate use disorder. The fact that you have literally cooked the receptors in your brain. The opiate receptors will demand to be fed. Now, there are people that they say that using a small enough amount, to get down to where you take a 0.5 milligram a day or something like that. But there are a lot of doctors who are saying that 5 years, for somebody who has opiate use disorder is the point at which you will try to see what, life is going to be like without it. If I had to be like this for the rest of my life, I'm with Mark. I am, if this isn't normal, bro, it is the most normal I've ever been in 53 years.
And I do want to say this because, he makes a point that long-term use, could be affect you long-term. Yes, it can, but so can a Big Mac.
Well, here's the thing.
And I'm not
You
trying
know,
to I'm not trying to
no, no,
downplay
no, no,
that at
no, no,
all.
no.
I just
I'm
I
not
just
actually laughing at you. I'm actually looking at something my brother said. He says it's a bummer for people on Suboxone to have to defend themselves. Here's the thing. You know what? I don't.
I,
If it sounds
I'm
that
not
way to
defending
you,
myself either. I want them
no.
to understand that.
If it sounds that way to you,
Yeah.
I am the happiest cat in North America. I really am. And my thing with virtually everything. I'm not saying I'm the smartest cat in the world with recovery. I'm not the smartest cat in the world with anything. I can tell you I spent 7 years doing nothing but reading about this, right? And studying every aspect of it. And I was in the camp of people that said, you don't do that, right? But it came from a place of not knowing. And very often the people that make comments about it also come from that place. And we've had doctors on here. If you'd like to go back and watch some of those, some really amazing stuff was done on, from that doctor who said, I came in with this. Like I had the exact same mindset where I thought there was just something wrong with people.
Dr. Jetmore.
Dr. Jetmore, he said, and once I started to give people, a drug that removed this from their life, I watched people become human beings. I watched the personalities come back and things like that.
And I would like to say this too, John. You have a really good. It sounds like you have a very, very good educated opinion. So, and that's what I'm saying. That's your experience.
It's an opinion,
and
absolutely.
That's great. I mean, honestly, I hope you don't think that I'm like targeting what you're saying there. I'm just trying to give you the other side of it, and most likely you probably heard it, but maybe not in that way. And I hope that like I said, I've been on the. If this is like your first or second time here, I don't know if it is. I've not seen you here, but I think I've seen you here one other time. But I miss people sometimes. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is I've been in recovery for 11 years, and I've been on this drug for 11 years. Okay, I've not seen any kind of side effect that wasn't going to happen yet. And that's the other thing. I'm not saying that it won't, because it could. There anything that's not native to what we're supposed to be putting into our bodies. There's a chance it could. I'm not trying to say that there's not. I'm just saying for me, the other option is definitely worse. And there for me, and this is me. Now I can say this too, and I haven't spoke about this in a very long time. I got myself down to 2 milligrams a day, Tommy.
Yeah.
Years ago, and I can tell you right now that and I'm not going to go into the story how I got back up to. It was a nursing mistake and my mistake, and it was weird. It was a very weird situation when I got jacked back up. But I can tell you right now that I don't feel much different than what I did there. So what I'm trying to say is that the drug now is not affecting me any different than what it did when I was that low. So that should give people an understanding that it was not making me high.
It doesn't get you high.
Yeah,
and honestly, and if there's any, that's something that I will actually, and that is a point I do defend. If you've never done the drug, I'm sure it would destroy you. But I could eat. I mean, there's no amount of Suboxone that I could eat that would give me a buzz. And if you believe that that's not the case, with all due respect, it's out of ignorance. I assure you that all it's doing at that point.
Yeah, and again, and it sounds like everybody's talking here is very educated on what they're saying. I mean, it's not something, and this is what's special about the lifeboat. We can have these conversations and walk out and hold hands and smack each other's booty and say good game. So,
I'll not be smacking any booty.
Well, you won't mind if I ask you to. Anyway, I'm just kidding. But no, and that's the thing, and that's what's special about what we got going on here. We're not ever mad at anybody. I'm not ever. I just want other people to, when we have conversations like this, it's good to see that side and my side, and then you choose.
Sure.
Honestly.
Rip makes a point that I think is fascinating. I just had this conversation with somebody the other day. Rip says, when you do research, you're going to find that they are finding that Suboxone has positive antidepressant. Right now, there are 2 studies being done with the idea that they're going to use it as an antidepressant. Now, it wouldn't be in the same formulation, but there is a lot of stuff being done right now for coming in with that.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, Fiona, we might work that out.
Right. It's again. Good God. This ain't even gonna say nothing.
You didn't put up the link. I just saw something that said you didn't put up the link for
shoot,
the
I didn't. Okay, hold on.
The call-in.
Hold on 1 second, guys. Well, the number's at the bottom of the screen. Well, the link is. I got to change that number, by the way. I got sidetracked. I was running a little bit behind when I got over here today.
Tracy says Toradol is a good temporary pain relief, no question. And if you're somebody that has gotten off of opiates, I always recommend that if you end up in an emergency room,
first thing you ask for.
that you bring up Toradol to the doctors. It is a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, but it is most often given in an injection, and it is actually a fantastic pain reliever. It's and it is temporary pain relief, and without a question.
Yeah, and listen to your doctor when she's talking to you, or he, because if you go into the emergency room and they're thinking you're going to have a surgery, they're going to tell you, no, you're not getting Toradol. They will not do the surgery if they give you an injection of Toradol. So,
right.
Just so you know. That happened to me. It's the only reason why I even freaking know that. You go in there with a massive, with a freaking kidney stone until they do the CAT scan and see how big it is. You ain't getting Toradol. Then that's exactly, I fought that doctor, and she's like, listen, your blood pressure's it was like, it was 220 over 110 or 120 or something stupid. She's like, you're going to have a heart attack before we can get you down there to even do the test. You got to get your blood pressure down. I was like, well, okay, whatever, but don't give me any more than what you have to. And she did. And believe it or not, guys, I didn't even feel it. It brought my pain down. But because of the Suboxone that was in my system, I didn't get high off of it. It was awesome, really.
You didn't get high off
the pain medication she gave me.
Oh, okay.
Because she gave me a shot. I can't remember what it was. She gave me a shot of something. I think it was Dilaudid. I think is what she gave me.
Oh wow.
Yeah, she gave me a big dog right there because my blood pressure was so high, and it was from the pain. It was I had a kidney stone. It was like 6 millimeters. Wouldn't pass, so I had to have surgery like a couple of days later. But yeah.
Johnny, you are confusing Toradol with another drug because you and I have had this conversation, and it wasn't Toradol. You're thinking of. Oh Lord, I can't think of the name of it right now, which is just
Tramadol.
No, not Tramadol. It's I'll think of it, and it won't be tonight. That's usually how that works. Unfortunately, that's the way that goes. But it is what it is. A couple of shots to the head, too many. The point of this evening, and it very. Hey, Brandon, thank you, bud. Love you too. It's one of those things that. Anytime it gets brought up, it tends to side. It could be Tegretol. That might have been it, but I'll remember it another time. My brother and I had a long talk about this. Tegretol does tend to give people dark thoughts. The thing with buprenorphine, the thing with methadone, any of the drugs that they're giving people for, Topamax is uniquely Australian, Fiona. They don't get that outside the U.S. It's another form of OxyContin, believe it or not. It is an OxyContin version drug, just called Topamax. It's for migraines. Anyway, any of the cessation drugs, anything that somebody takes a drug as a way to get off of another drug, has a dual effect on an audience. Number one, it stimulates conversation, and 99.9% of the time, that's a really good thing. It really is. The other thing is that there are always people who feel that there is an attack element to it. But what it really does is it kind of gets, and we do shows on it specifically so we can spend an hour talking about it. But the point I really wanted to make for tonight, which we kind of got sidetracked on, was that when you look at what the Sackler family did, there's a reason we beat the drum. And, right now, no museum will take their money, right? There is literally $1 billion a year paid to Sacklers who never had anything to do with the company. These are descendants of the original three, and they just get because of their stock. They just get dividends and they get payouts. And the question becomes, is it still cool that these people are raking in the kind of money from the things that the family has done? The real takeaway from this is we can't let this crap happen again. And whenever you bring this up, there are people who go, well, we've learned our lesson. This family's done it twice, right? Like if the first time they had done it was OxyContin, you might go, well, this is the second time they've done it. So what it really comes down to is I would not be even slightly surprised if they try it again. Really. I mean, they've learned nothing in the process. They really haven't. If you look at any of the court papers, and they're all online, you can look at all of the lawsuits, all of everything, when they've paid out $200 million or they've paid out X amount of money, whatever the case may be. Not on one of those pieces of paper does the word Sackler ever appear. Not once. The lengths that they have gone to keep their name out of any filings, out of any lawsuits. This is an evil group of people. They really are. This is a damn evil group of people. Of the original three, the last of the original three died about 6 years ago. However, Dick is still alive. And, again, he's doing everything he can to distance himself as much as possible from certainly Oxy and nowadays even from Purdue. But if you think for a half a second that this can't happen again, just realize it's happened twice with the same family, right? They made $100 million selling Valium. This is also a family that had mountains, right, to do with the fact that there's only two places in the world you can advertise a prescription drug on television. And one is the United States of America, right? You can thank the Sacklers for that. It literally has changed the entire medical community. People don't go to doctors anymore and say, I'm having a problem. That my back hurts, or when I go to sleep at night, I can't, my legs do this one. They walk in and say, this is what's wrong with me, and I want this drug. Now, that's a frightening thing. It's scary that the amount of money that we spend annually in advertising for drugs is more than the gross national product of some countries, right? It's a frightening thing that we have made that mainstream. And once again, it's the Sacklers. So I think that we have to be on our guard, as bad as it is, that we don't watch this happen again, that this isn't something that we see a third round, because for the love of God, this has killed more people than most wars, right? We literally think about you think about Vietnam and you go, oh Lord, how awful. It was 59,000 people, right? We've lost 1 million to overdoses. 1 million. We're losing 300 a day. Every 10 days, the population of the crew of the lifeboat is gone. Every 10 days. So that's the takeaway, people. I mean, that's the take.
How did we respond after 9/11? I'll say it like that. How many people did we lose in that? And the whole world went crazy over that. And we're not doing it over this. It makes no sense.
Yeah, no, it really does. And something, it was post-surgery pain management that got me on Oxy. They just sent me home with some. The really sad things, and the opioid receptors can be restored. Honestly, they can't. John, do some research on that, brother, because they can't. I'm not busting your chops. I'm really not. But when you say they can be restored, they're never damaged, bud. They're not damaged in the slightest. It's a reaction to a part of your brain that doesn't think, right? It literally is the striatum. The center part of your brain is what ends up triggering that receptor to cause angst within the brain. But they're not damaged in the process.
He's confusing neural pathways with receptors.
He is confusing neural pathways because your receptors, they don't need restoration. They don't. What needs to happen is that you just have to stop putting opiates on them, and you have to learn how to live with a part of your brain that demands you to feed it. Just plain and simple. Alrighty, people. So we are at the time that if we go any further, the big red button buries our video, which is always kind of a bummer. Hey, if you happen to run into somebody whose name is Sackler, Tell them I said hello, would you?
Yeah.
And we will be back tomorrow night.
Look.
Same bat time, same bat channel. You know what? Love every one of you.
Exactly.
Whether we agree or disagree, or whether, the bottom line is, I truthfully love all of you. The fact that you're here, the fact that you're trying to fight the good fight. But
yeah, exactly.
Tommy got up the exit sign. Yes, I did. Looks pretty good too, doesn't it?
It looks really good, actually.
I did the exit sign.
Yeah, it looked really good.
Fiona says, to help squirrel's addiction to cobwebs, my cat eats cobwebs. Really kind of odd. It's her favorite thing in the entire world. I don't think $2 is going to do it. Thank you so much. Now I'm going to go eat something. People, I am Captain Tommy Scoble on the other side of the glass.
Mark Wages.
And you know what this is? This is a cat in a basket. Say goodnight, squirrel. All right. Good night, everybody.